Derek Vinyard walked out of prison believing he could save his little brother before it was too late. Instead, the story ended in tragedy. Behind the scenes, however, an entirely different battle was only beginning. The film's own director tried to erase his name from the movie, while one young star's life was consumed by addiction, and another transformed himself so completely that fans barely recognize him today. 28 years later, this is what really happened to the American History X cast in 2026. Of course, our first stop is Edward Norton. In 1998, he turned down a role in Saving Private Ryan to play Derek Vinyard, a ruthless white supremacist leader who entered prison consumed by hatred and emerged as a profoundly changed man. Norton was only 29 years old when he accepted the challenge, undergoing an intense training regimen and gaining more than 11 kilograms of muscle to fully embody Derek. The extraordinary performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor and firmly established him as one of the finest actors of his generation, paving the way for acclaimed performances in Fight Club, Birdman, and many other celebrated films. But when filming ended, another battle was just beginning. After New Line Cinema rejected the film's original cut, Norton became directly involved in reshaping the final version. His decision sparked a bitter conflict with director Tony Kaye, who publicly sued over the film and even demanded that his name be removed from the credits. From that point on, Norton developed a reputation for being intensely perfectionistic and difficult to collaborate with, even though his acting talent was never questioned. Following high-profile relationships with Courtney Love and Salma Hayek, he married producer Shauna Robertson in 2012. The couple have one son, and by 2026, at the age of 56, Norton continues to lead a quiet family life, staying far away from the spotlight and Hollywood's constant drama. Then there was Edward Furlong, whose story was only beginning. 7 years after becoming famous as John Connor in Terminator 2. Judgment Day, he stepped into the role of Danny Vinyard, the younger brother struggling to escape the shadow of Derek's violent white supremacist ideology, gradually finding his own voice through the journal he writes for his teacher. Furlong was just 21 years old when he delivered the emotionally powerful performance, earning a Young Artist Award nomination and appearing to begin another brilliant chapter in a career that had started with extraordinary promise. Instead, the next chapter became a heartbreaking downward spiral that lasted for nearly 2 decades. Drug and alcohol addiction took control of his life. He was repeatedly arrested on charges involving domestic violence, restraining order violations, and drug-related offenses. The consequences were devastating, ultimately costing him his role in Terminator 3, the comeback that could have restored his career. Years of substance abuse severely damaged his health, forcing him to undergo surgery to replace all of his teeth with dentures in 2022. After multiple stays in rehabilitation, Furlong revealed that he has remained completely sober since around 2018. By 2026, at 48 years old, he continues rebuilding both his life and career, appearing at fan conventions, taking on independent film projects, and embracing a quieter future after years of personal turmoil. In American History X, Avery Brooks did not play a violent extremist or one of the victims. Instead, he became the film's moral compass as Dr. Bob Sweeney, the compassionate black principal who refuses to give up on Derek Vinyard and patiently guides him away from the hatred that once defined his life. Brooks was 50 years old when he took on the role, bringing decades of classical stage experience and his work as a professor of theater at Rutgers University into every scene. At the same time, Brooks was already an icon to science fiction fans around the world for portraying Captain Benjamin Sisko in Star Trek: Deep Space Nine. However, Brooks gradually stepped away from the screen after the early 2000s. He returned to the passions that had shaped him long before fame: jazz, theater, and teaching. His marriage to Vicki Ann Cox, which began in 1976, has remained strong for nearly 5 decades, and together they raised 3 children. By 2026, at 77 years old, Brooks continues to live a quiet, private life, occasionally participating in Star Trek events while devoting his time to music, education, and preserving the artistic legacy that has always mattered most to him. Do you remember Seth Ryan? At his heaviest, Ethan Suplee weighed more than 240 kilograms. It was during that period that he was cast as Seth Ryan, the fiercely loyal, hot-tempered neo-Nazi who stood beside Derek Vinyard through nearly every act of violence in American History X. Suplee was just 22 years old when he took on the role, and his imposing size became inseparable from the characters Hollywood offered him for years afterward. He went on to build a successful career with memorable performances in Remember the Titans, My Name is Earl, The Wolf of Wall Street, and Babylon, almost always playing physically intimidating men. Eventually, however, he realized the enormous toll his weight was taking on his health. Determined to change, Suplee committed himself to disciplined nutrition and intense strength training, ultimately losing more than 110 kilograms. The transformation was so dramatic that many fans could hardly recognize the actor who had once portrayed Seth Ryan. According to Suplee, the motivation did not come from Hollywood or any director. It came from the peaceful life he wanted beyond the spotlight. He married Brandy Lewis in 2006, and together they have 4 children. Suplee has often said that his love for his wife and his desire to be present for his children inspired him to transform his life. By 2026, at 49 years old, he continues acting while also hosting his American Glutton podcast, sharing fitness, nutrition, and weight loss experiences that have inspired millions around the world. No one in the Vinyard family suffered more quietly than Beverly D'Angelo's Doris. At 47, she took on the role of Doris Vinyard, a mother forced to watch both of her sons become consumed by neo-Nazi ideology while she herself struggles with illness and the collapse of her family. She carries the emotional weight of the story, her exhausted expression reflecting years of fear, grief, and helplessness. D'Angelo's deeply moving performance earned her a Satellite Award nomination and remains one of the most powerful portrayals of motherhood in the film. However, her personal life proved just as eventful as many of the characters she portrayed. After her marriage to Italian nobleman Don Lorenzo Salviati, D'Angelo's most publicized relationship was with Al Pacino, lasting from 1997 to 2003. At the age of 49, she gave birth to twins, a son and a daughter, through IVF. Following their separation, the former couple endured a highly publicized custody battle before eventually reaching an agreement to co-parent their children. In 2026, at 74 years old, Beverly D'Angelo continues acting in film and television while remaining a respected Hollywood veteran, balancing selective screen roles with family life and occasional appearances at industry events. Next came Fairuza Balk. Already known for her dark, magnetic screen presence, she was only 24 when she played Stacy, Derek Vinyard's fiercely devoted girlfriend. Her unwavering embrace of white supremacist ideology made Stacy one of the film's most unsettling supporting characters, while Balk's piercing intensity gave the role a chilling sense of authenticity. Long before that, at the age of 11, she had been chosen from more than 1,200 candidates to play Dorothy in Disney's Return to Oz, launching a career that would take her from British and French productions to major Hollywood films. But as the 1990s came to an end, Balk began to grow disillusioned with the pressures of commercial filmmaking and the relentless competition surrounding blockbuster productions. She deliberately chose a different path. She devoted more of her time to painting, independent music, and smaller independent films. Today, she is 51 years old and continues to work selectively as an actress while pursuing her artistic passions, remaining one of the most enigmatic and unconventional performers to emerge from Hollywood's 1990s generation. Then there was Stacy Keach, whose comeback was as remarkable as any role he ever played. After his 1984 arrest for cocaine possession led to a 6-month prison sentence, many assumed his career would never recover. Yet 14 years later, at 57, he delivered one of his most unforgettable performances as Cameron Alexander, the calculating extremist who manipulated Derek Vinyard from the shadows. His calm authority and calculating cruelty made Cameron far more terrifying than someone who relied on violence alone. Few people realize that long before becoming famous as Mike Hammer or later as Henry Pope in Prison Break, Keach had already overcome enormous personal challenges. Born with a cleft lip and partial cleft palate, he endured multiple surgeries throughout childhood before developing the unmistakable voice that would become one of his greatest trademarks. In 2009, Keach suffered a minor stroke, but made a full recovery. His personal life was equally eventful, with 3 failed marriages before finding lasting happiness with Malgosia Tomasi, whom he married in 1986. Nearly 4 decades later, their marriage remains strong. By 2026, at 84 years old, Keach continues to work as a respected actor and voice performer, occasionally appearing in film, television, and theater while enjoying one of the longest and most enduring careers in Hollywood. For many people, Elliott Gould will always be remembered for his legendary relationship with Barbra Streisand, a marriage that lasted from 1963 to 1971. But in American History X, at the age of 60, he stepped into a very different role as Murray, the kind-hearted Jewish schoolteacher who dates Doris Vinyard and becomes one of the few compassionate voices in a family slowly being torn apart by hatred and racism. His quiet warmth was only one chapter in an extraordinary career. Gould had already earned an Academy Award nomination for Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, became a leading man in MASH, later delighted audiences as Ruben Tishkoff in the Ocean's 11 trilogy, and introduced himself to a new generation as Jack Geller, the lovable father of Monica and Ross in Friends. Away from the cameras, however, his personal life was far more turbulent. After his marriage to Streisand ended, Gould married Jennifer Bogart, divorced her, remarried her, and eventually divorced her again. As of 2026, at 87 years old, Elliott Gould remains one of the last living icons of Hollywood's New Wave era, making occasional screen appearances while continuing to attend film festivals, retrospective events, and celebrations honoring his remarkable legacy. The next unforgettable performance belonged to Guy Torry. At 29, he portrayed Lamont, the quick-witted inmate whose unexpected friendship gradually challenged Derek Vinyard's deeply rooted hatred. Without grand speeches or dramatic confrontations, Torry helped create one of the film's most meaningful emotional turning points. Before taking on the role, Torry had already built a reputation as a gifted stand-up comedian, bringing his natural timing and effortless charisma to the screen. After American History X, he appeared in films such as Life, Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood, and Runaway Jury, earning praise for his ability to balance comedy with dramatic performances. Yet breaking into Hollywood's top tier of leading stars proved far more difficult than making audiences laugh. Rather than chasing blockbuster roles that rarely came, Torry gradually returned to the world that had launched his career, live stand-up comedy. He expanded into producing and developing comedy projects behind the scenes while continuing to perform on stage, where he always felt most at home. By 2026, at 57 years old, Guy Torry remains an active comedian, actor, producer, and host. He continues touring with stand-up shows, appearing in independent film and television projects, and supporting charitable initiatives, while fans still remember Lamont as the man whose laughter helped change Derek Vinyard's life forever. The story then looked back to William Russ. He was 48 years old when he played Dennis Vinyard, the father whose ordinary conversations around the dinner table slowly became the foundation of his son's hatred. Despite appearing in only a few flashback scenes, Russ left one of the film's most lasting impressions. Yet those brief moments carry enormous emotional weight, helping explain how an ordinary household slowly became consumed by racism and violence. Ironically, while audiences were watching Russ portray one of cinema's most damaging fathers, television viewers knew him for the complete opposite. During the same era, he was beloved as Alan Matthews, the caring, patient, and devoted father on Boy Meets World, a role that made him a familiar face to an entire generation throughout the series' 7-season run. Away from the spotlight, Russ has always preferred a quiet and private life. He married actress Claire Wren, and together they have 2 children. Throughout a career spanning decades, he has remained respected for his professionalism while avoiding the scandals that often surround Hollywood. By 2026, at 75 years old, William Russ continues to work occasionally as an actor while enjoying a peaceful family life, making selective appearances at fan conventions and television reunions, where Boy Meets World remains a cherished part of his enduring legacy. Before American History X, Jennifer Lien had already become a familiar face on television as the gentle Kes in Star Trek, Voyager. But at just 24 years old, she revealed a very different side as Davina Vineyard, the only member of the family brave enough to challenge Derek's growing extremism and speak out against the hatred tearing her family apart. In 2002, however, Lien unexpectedly walked away from acting. Few imagined that her retirement would mark the beginning of the darkest chapter of her life. Over the following years, bipolar disorder and substance abuse gradually took a devastating toll. Between 2012 and 2018, she was arrested multiple times on charges including domestic assault, resisting arrest, reckless driving, and an incident involving public nudity in the presence of children that shocked the public. Courts repeatedly ordered her to undergo mandatory psychiatric treatment as concerns over her mental health continued to grow. By 2026, at 51 years old, Jennifer Lien remains almost entirely out of the public eye. She has never returned to acting and continues living a private life away from Hollywood, leaving behind one of the most tragic and heartbreaking stories among the cast of American History X. Finally, we have Christopher Masterson. In 1998, he was 18 years old when he appeared in American History X as Daryl Dawson, one of the younger members of Derek Vineyard's neo-Nazi gang, a teenager drawn into a world of hatred before fully understanding its consequences. Although his role was relatively small, it introduced audiences to a promising young actor who was about to become a familiar face on television. Just 2 years later, Masterson stepped into a completely different role as Francis, Malcolm's rebellious older brother in the hit sitcom Malcolm in the Middle. Away from the screen, however, the Masterson name became associated with a very different story. Christopher is the younger brother of Danny Masterson, and their family has long been connected to the Church of Scientology. In 2023, Danny was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison for rape, placing the entire Masterson family under intense media scrutiny, including Christopher, despite his having no involvement in the case. Amid that turbulence, he chose a different path. In 2019, he married actress Yolanda Pecoraro and gradually stepped away from acting to focus on a professional career as a DJ. By 2026, at 46 years old, Christopher continues performing music at clubs and private events while living a far more private life, keeping his distance from both Hollywood and the controversies surrounding his family. So that's the American History X, 1998, cast in 2026. Which cast member surprised you the most, and which performance left the biggest impression on you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Then and Now videos.